Beautiful city of Houston, where he has served as the director of the Menil Collection since 2004. He has curated many exhibitions at the Menil, but none more prominent than the exhibition you can see today called Experiments with Truth, Gandhi and Images of Nonviolence. Please welcome on stage Dr. Joseph Puffles.
Good evening. I would like to start by thanking the Gandhi Library and other organizers of this auspicious event for inviting me tonight. It is a tremendous honor to be with all of you at this moment. One of the questions I have been asked the most often recently is, what is it that makes Gandhi important? Why Gandhi? And why now? The more I have thought about and struggled to answer this question, the more I appreciate the need, the urgency even, to find answers to it. Gandhi is, at least in my view, a very complex figure, deeply shaped by his own inner search and conflicts, as well as by India's overwhelmingly complex transition from British colony to divided and to this day still antagonistic modern nation states. As we know, Gandhi survived the independence and partition only by a few months, and he was both an agent in as well as an agonized, increasingly powerless observer of this process. A process full of countless personal tragedies. And yet, despite our growing distance from this point in history, India's independence and partition, and from Gandhi's lifetime, Gandhi simply refuses to sink into the oblivion of history and continues to arouse strong feelings, both among his admirers and his critics. So why is it still relevant, perhaps even more so than ever, to think about this man and his values and objectives? Almost 75 years after his assassination, Gandhi is now, unlike most political leaders of the past, a truly global figure. His vision of India, this beautiful and moving land, admired by so many, including non-Indians like myself, home of some of the world's oldest religions, was one of an inclusive, tolerant, multicultural, and multi-religious India. I have always felt Gandhi's dream for his homeland is actually pertinent to the whole world. And it isn't what is Houston today, a place where people with all their diverse cultures, traditions, and faiths have come together. Isn't this a great place to celebrate Gandhi? Gandhi repeatedly mentioned that his spiritual search, his very personal pursuit for moral improvement, was inseparable from political action. As a deeply religious man, he said he felt compelled to act where help was most needed. That it was his duty to eliminate India's chronic poverty, improve gender equality, establish an economy based on moral principles, not just on private profit, create respect for every religion, abandon untouchability, reduce the distance between rich and poor, and improve education, health, and sanitation. A rather astonishing list of complex issues to wrestle with. However, Gandhi was convinced that none of this was achievable through violent means, and that at the core of nonviolence was the search for spiritual self-realization, or as he called it, the search for truth. It is amazing to me how relevant this sounds today, and right here in the teeming, fascinating city of Houston. The number of specific causes Gandhi championed is simply astonishing. How could a man whose life was so busy cover as much ground? Starting as a lawyer, he became an activist, a popular leader, a social reformer who founded self-sustaining community in both South Africa and India. There are so many Gandhis. He was a political strategist and prolific writer, interested in alternative medicine, vegetarianism, a practitioner of his own faith as well as a student of other religions, etc. And Gandhi was also perhaps the least successful a family man. One of the most precious and maybe important gifts Gandhi gave to the world is his remarkably original and tolerant understanding of morality and religion. Gandhi was a deeply religious man, as we know, although in a very personal, eclectic, or in today's vocabulary, non-fundamentalist way, searching for a truth that was not necessarily confined to one faith. In the course of his studies of different religious traditions, Gandhi discovered and repeatedly maintained in his writings and speeches that basic commitments to truth and nonviolence can be found in all religions, as we have just very beautifully heard actually tonight in the invocations and just before I speak. Resisting any claim of definitive, exclusively correct interpretation of Holy Scriptures, Gandhi declared, and I quote him, "I decline to be bound by any interpretation, however learned it may be, if it is repugnant to reason or moral sense," end quote. As he had experienced through the living example of his parents, Gandhi always believed in the natural relationship between personal or spiritual life and the public life of service to others, especially the poor and disadvantaged. The relationship between personal spiritual practice and public service is a crucial element of Gandhi's understanding of religion, inseparably linked to his own experience. When I visited India in 2009, meeting with people and doing work in preparation for the current exhibition, Experiments with Truth, Gandhi and Images of Nonviolence, several Indian friends cautioned me not to be surprised that Gandhi had many critics and was actually not everywhere popular and always popular in India. In a way, that did not come as a surprise to me, given the number of controversial issues Gandhi had tried to address throughout his life. Inevitably, setbacks will always be part of such an enormous endeavor, I thought. When I read and reread his autobiography, I was always impressed by how openly Gandhi mentioned his own shortcomings and failures, including his perhaps most painful one, his failures as a husband and even more so as a father. The honesty of his own writing made Gandhi more human and, in my opinion, gives him more credibility and even more charisma. But to come back to my experience of learning about Gandhi's unpopularity in some quarters, we should not forget that he was attacked relentlessly all his life. The most extreme, of course, manifestation of such attacks was his assassination when his life was ended with a gun by a man of his own faith. It is interesting, therefore, that Gandhi is mentioned and praised over and over, and apparently even co-opted by some of the people who were behind and supporters of the man who murdered him. But how would Gandhi react? It's interesting to think about that. No doubt, non-violently. he might smile one of his witty smiles. A sheer range of what Gandhi covered and tried to achieve in his life, and of course his core values, especially his concept of nonviolence, makes him a timeless, very relevant and fascinating figure today and probably in the future. Like all great figures in history, Gandhi was in many ways ahead of his time. It is a truly wonderful honor to be with you here tonight and reflect on his legacy to us here in Houston and wherever we all are. Thank you so much.